Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
Welcome to it. Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you're with another episode this week. As always, you can email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Got a lot of listener feedback this week, which will probably be most of the focus of this week's episode in the absence of any other major news as we continue to await more details about the official release of Depeche Mode M. That being said, I want to share something with you. First off, something that's been shared quite a bit throughout the fandom over the course of the past week. As a matter of fact, I had it listed to talk about on last week's show, and I just completely failed to go and address it, even though I put a link to this particular item in the notes for the show. You can find it there. So, a couple of items before we get to that, though. First off, in my weekly digging, my perusing, my scouring of the internet, I discovered that coming out on Tuesday, July 29th, BBC Radio 4 is going to be hosting a special Depeche Mode short documentary called Depeche Mode Reach Out and Touch Faith. Sasha Faree Jones leads you on an unlikely journey of Depeche Mode's world domination through class, coolness, eyeliner, bondage, synths, and Britain's cultural insularity. So again, this is slated to drop on the 29th of this month on BBC Radio 4. And there's a link attached to it, and what I'll do is, so not next week, but the week after, I'll be sure to post a specific link to the episode. And I believe this is just an audio episode, no video attached to it. So that's the one news item that I can share this week on the show. There's something else that I discovered. It might be something. It probably isn't, but I wanted to share it with you anyhow. So I've gotten my hands on a clean copy. It appears that it was still recorded during one of the screenings of Depeche Mode M, but I have been able to get my hands on at least the cleanest copy that I've heard of the unreleased song that's included in the credits of the film of In the End. I'm working on cleaning it up a little bit more and providing the intro to it. There's no intro attached to the audio of the song. However, you can kind of extrapolate what the intro would have been based off of the remainder of the song. So keep an eye out on your podcast feed. I won't be able to post this on YouTube for copyright infringement purposes, but I can go and post it on the podcast. So keep an eye on your podcast in the next few days, and I'll post just a clean copy of it once I have a chance to throw it into Adobe Audition and mess with it. The reason I bring it up, not just because I want you to keep an eye on your podcast, is because working in Apple iTunes, I dumped the MP3 into Apple iTunes. And even when it comes to things such as bootlegs, which essentially this is, of an official track that hasn't been released, I like to go in and add the relevant details and info, whether it's the graphic, right, the thumbnail that goes along with whatever the song is. In this case, I just used the Memento Mori cover, since this track was from the Memento Mori sessions. But then I went in and added the details in terms of album name and song title. What was interesting, though, is when I went in to add that info in Apple iTunes for those that have used this before, and it probably rings true for most music streaming platforms. But in Apple iTunes, you can go to Get Info, and then you can update all the different aspects of the specific details regarding whatever song it is. And they often provide drop-down menus where Apple iTunes will try to go and fill in the blank like Google. Those are based off of actual items within Apple's catalog. When I went to add what album In the End came from, it provided a drop-down option of Memento Mori bonus track edition. Now, this is not to say that it's attached to In the End. I hadn't even added the title of the song yet. It is to say that when I was searching for Depeche Mode, and it provided Depeche Mode as an option, right? You press D and it starts bringing up D band names, and you start typing out Depeche, and eventually it'll land on Depeche Mode. Same thing happened with Memento Mori. Typed in Memento Mori, and for those that aren't aware, Flyleaf actually has an album named Memento Mori going back to several years ago. But one of the options was Memento Mori bonus track edition. There is no Memento Mori bonus track edition. There's the deluxe edition that they released, but that did not have any extra tracks on it. And as far as I know, and as a matter of fact, I will just reconfirm this. I'll go into my Apple iTunes right now and do just a quick search for Depeche Mode and Memento Mori. And I'm just out of pure curiosity, I want to see if it ends up autofilling any of that. So my apologies for doing this on the fly, as my typing is atrocious. You know, by the way, for some reason, I always default to spelling memento, M-O instead of M-E. I don't know why. I don't know why I do that. So, yeah. No, there is no Memento Mori bonus edition listed up front, but it is available as a drop-down option. So, I don't know. I'm not going to read a lot into it. I can't imagine at this point in time that the band has made any sort of decision wherein they would have sent out that information to streaming platforms, wherein they would have felt the need to go and put that in the system already. But the fact that it was an option for the album title, I just found rather interesting, and I wanted to share it with you this week. What if Depeche Mode recorded Violator in the 1950s? YouTube creator at Marcev76, Marceve 76, according to the article from Sideline, has too much time on his hands, so it seems. A few days ago, he released a YouTube video in which he reimagined Depeche Mode's 1990 Violator as if it were recorded in the 1950s by the Depeche Modes. He also created a very subtle band picture featuring Depeche Mode in its 1990 lineup, obviously used by AI, by the way. You can pretty much tell. The 28-minute, 12-second video was uploaded on July 7th, and while the vocal line isn't that of Dave Gahan or Martin Gore, you get an idea of how it could have been. The project probably relied heavily on cutting-edge artificial intelligence tools. I would argue that it probably was all AI. While the process isn't detailed in the video description, the techniques likely involve a combination of AI music generation, auto manipulation, and style transfer based on industry standard practices for such projects. Now, the creator is no stranger to this retro AI alchemy, to put it mildly, having built a YouTube channel around reimagining iconic albums as 1950s recordings. The catalog spans a diverse range of artists and genres, each transformed with the same meticulous care as Violator. I didn't include the music on the podcast, again, simply because I want to avoid any sort of copyright infringement. And while the vocals are not Dave or Martin, clearly, I still didn't want to run the risk of having to go and re-edit the podcast. But that being said, the link is available in the podcast notes. So I hope you will go and check it out. I was actually texting back and forth with my buddy Jon, Jon Justice, and longtime friend of this show. And I agree with him. I think Waiting for the Night is probably one of the most interesting tracks on it. Although the entire album reimagined in 50s music in and of itself being an oddity is a rather enjoyable listen. And listen, I'm kind of a preferred way that I think AI, is useful in giving us an idea. and reimagining things like this that were never possible before. If you've listened to my past comments regarding Depeche Mode and AI, and I was a little more open to it before, and it quickly burned on me. It's interesting, those first few tracks that were created, and specifically that one, Like a Mystery by Andrea Fryer, I still feel is one of the best. And that was, that's sort of ancient AI technology by today's standards of what AI is now capable of. But at the end of the day, the other AI versions that I've heard of Depeche just have not met any sort of standard relating to their being enjoyable. That's a very convoluted way for me to say that they're just not very good. All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week on the show. First off, we hear from Matthew Swinnerton, who writes this. Hey, John, thanks for bringing up the Dodger Stadium shows. I can't believe that was 35 years ago. Of course, that was the show that so many DM fans wish we had the full video recording of. Also, pretty amazing that the shows were just 2 years, 1 month, 17 days after 101. The Rose Bowl was my first concert ever, and thanks to ChatGPT for figuring that out for me. Again, good use of AI in the end of the day. It was a special time, like you mentioned, for Los Angeles Depeche Mode fans. It was such a different world that we were experiencing. Now, security to any venue was super tight, but back then, you just walked in before the sound checks and sat down and watched the sound check. No one asked us to leave. We did that for The Cure when they played the year before in the Pixies. Love and Rockets at Dodger Stadium just walked right in around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Matthew posted a couple of photos from the soundtrack when they were watching of those Dodger Stadium shows. And Matthew, I emailed this to him, but I'll just add again, I cannot thank him enough for sharing that, sharing those photos. I had not seen any images from that day, those days, since those days. And I distinctly remember those days, especially the first night. I remember driving up in my father's tan Volkswagen bus with my buddies, my buddy Mike, his girlfriend at the time that inevitably became my girlfriend, be that as it may, Christina, and some of our other friends listening to electronic in the car. We had floor seats, 10th row, for the first night of that show. And seeing those photos just took me right back, and it was absolutely amazing. Seeing the 101 photos, right? You see those every single year, and you've got all of the 101 imagery along with the documentary, along with the booklet and Anton Corbijn's photos and the soundtrack and everything else. But you don't have that for Dodger Stadium. And you're right, for LA fans, those were huge shows, and I'll never forget those shows. And so it was just a special treat to have you share those. Matthew goes on to say, for no news weeks, I know it will be a lot more work, but interviewing fans that had cool experiences, small show, meeting the band, would be interesting for the podcast. Thank you for all you do. Matthew, I completely agree. And I don't know. One day I hope to get a lot better at that. I've mentioned this before. It's difficult because I just don't know when I'm going to be able to record the podcast because of my weekly schedule. And even right now as I sit here, it's 3:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm doing the show now because I know tomorrow I'm not going to have the time other than just piecing the show together to post it online, because this will be posted on Thursday. I've been wanting to get Rob Rahm on the show ever since he went and saw M, and I just haven't been able to do that because sometimes it's like, oh, I got an hour, I can go and record the podcast. So it's something that I'm definitely looking at doing in the future, and I know I've been saying that for a long time, but it's the full-time job, takes up a lot of my time. So next up, the channeling, right? You forgot Lillian, which was the shared single of John the Revelator. If they were on tour, they should live debut Lillian and People Are Good. So when I was covering the possibility of a singles tour sometime in the near future, of which I haven't heard any confirmation of, it's just been rumors, and probably weak rumors at that, to be honest. I did not forget Lillian. I intentionally didn't bring it up in my conversation. only because I can't imagine them ever doing that song live. And I always kind of looked at Lillian as being a B-side rather than a shared single with John the Revelator, even though you are technically correct. So it was an intentional oversight on my part. And Lillian's not a song that really ever grabbed me all that much anyhow. And I don't think I've ever gone and had a moment where I've thought, I need to go play Lillian. I don't think that's ever happened. All right, Dolores Luna writes, I'd like a smaller, more intimate tour that focuses on B-sides and acoustic interpretations of the songs. Maybe tell a few stories in between. Let it be a final tour for their true fans. I don't need to see Dave running around on stage and straining his voice in some of the songs now that he's in his 60s. Give a final goodbye to your fans and retire with dignity. I say that in the most respectful way possible. I'm a devotee for life. I certainly would want to go and watch a show like that. I will say for me personally, and I actually mentioned this to my wife recently, and it wasn't regarding Depeche Mode, it was just regarding it in general. I'm just over acoustic interpretations of songs. And I think I think I fluctuate. Sometimes I'm into it and sometimes I'm not. There was a time when I was really into acoustic Depeche Mode, but now I'm more, at the moment I'm leaning into the production aspect of it and fully produced and epic music, and acoustic songs just currently aren't my jam. But I can totally see why that would be a desired show and one that I would absolutely go and watch, regardless of how I feel personally right now about acoustic music. Fabian Flores says, an 0125 single tour could be really interesting if the band had chosen their singles better. This is the biggest problem for me. Every album released since has contained gems to play live. It makes you wonder if they're the ones who decide. My understanding is they typically do decide. And I know that when you look at a song like Heaven, that was targeted right out of the gate by the band to be the first single off of Delta Machine. And I can't understand why they would choose that song, even though that song has grown on me quite a bit. But I remember specifically Dave saying that they wanted Heaven to be the intro to Delta Machine because it was different and they wanted to set the vibe. And that's what they typically do with their lead singles off the album. Dream On was much in that way as well. And I thought that was a weak single to lead off of with Exciter. That being said, when it comes to In the End, and I'm staring at it right now on my desktop. That song to me should have been on Memento Mori. That In the End is single worthy to me. I cannot wait to hear a fully clean version released of that track because it's borderline as good in my opinion as my favorite songs off Memento Mori, Ghosts Again and Don't Say You Love Me specifically. So sometimes I scratch my head and ask, yeah, you're right. I don't know why they've chosen particular songs as singles. Volker Braun writes in and says, why another best of tour? Since 1998, every tour was a best of tour. Oh, you take that attitude somewhere else. I'm not going to go down the rationale of why they choose the songs that they do when it comes to their live shows, but I get it. But I don't agree. Anyway, Modeman 101 says, at this point, I doubt they would put together another chronological singles collection, picking up where 86 to 98 left off. If they were to release another compilation, I would expect a best of volume 2. Well, Modeman, I respectfully disagree. I would think that in sort of a completist way that an 01 to 25 or 23, depending on, what dates you want to use for when singles were officially released, I would think an 01 to, we'll split the difference, 24, single collection would chronologically, if the band weren't making any more music, would be the logical choice. The Best Of album didn't seem to really, grab anybody. I always felt the Best Of Volume 1, that felt the most cash grabby to me of compilation releases. I didn't feel that way about the singles releases. I didn't feel that way about Catching Up. That being said, I was much younger. the mere fact that Catching Up With was titled Catching Up With, to me, separated it from being sort of a greatest hits compilation, even though that's what it was called in Europe. And even the People Are People album, which it took me many years to realize that wasn't even an official album release. This was early on in my fandom. That was an American compilation they'd put together. The Best of Volume 1 just seemed to me like a bit of a cash grab because it was kind of just a combination of what we got via Catching Up With and the singles releases put on one album. So, but thank you for writing in. We can agree to disagree. It's all good. David Hudson, friend of the show, writes, "That's absolutely incredible," talking about Dodger Stadium. Dodger Stadium not only was Depeche Mode in the midst of their height of popularity, but simultaneously with Bernard Sumner and Johnny Marr performing, 3 of the 4 biggest alternative bands of our generation were represented. Yeah, and that show was just, God, it was so good. It's a tragedy we do not have an official release of that show in some capacity. It was such an interesting bridge between what the band had been doing live in terms of their stage presentation and where they were going with Anton Corbijn's visuals. You had a bit of Black Celebration and that tour in terms of the stage design, along with some of Music for the Masses, but then you have this elevated experience in Anton Corbijn and the visuals that he was providing. And then, of course, you get to just the incredible devotional tour. I mean, that's the bridge. The World Violation Tour stage design set list was the bridge to everything that came afterwards for the band. Instrumental Electronic Music writes, "Better with a tour with B-sides." So second vote for a B-sides tour. "But we're forgetting that it's hard to learn new songs. This tour, he was struggling to learn My Favorite Stranger." I wasn't aware of that. I didn't realize he was having a hard time with that. Interesting. All right, let's do one more, just for the sake of time, because my time is short this week, unfortunately. Hence why I'm recording this on Wednesday afternoon. Swash Girl 1 writes this: "I traveled from Houston with my daughter with great anticipation to attend the premiere of Depeche Mode M. The movie was a concert film interspersed with commentary about the Mexican culture and parallels between it and the theme of the album. Surprised and disappointed that Dave couldn't be bothered to even look in the direction of fans screaming, 'Dave, we love you,' on his way into the theater, let alone wave or, heaven forbid, sign any autographs. And on stage afterward, Dave admitted that he was less than enthused about doing another concert film. He also reported being annoyed with all the drone cameras in his face during filming. Overall, I got the feeling that he didn't want to be there." Interesting take on it. And, who knows, why Dave was in the apparent mood that he may have been in. I will say that, not an excuse, but I wonder. This was taking place in New York. They're out of any sort of creative element at the moment, right? Right now, they're kind of on hiatus. He's wrapped up this tour. He's living his life in New York City, doing whatever he's doing to buy his time. He's basically taking time off. He's in his off time right now. And yet, he is in New York, has to go to the premiere of this film, and, who knows what his attitude is towards it. And maybe he just wasn't kind of in the promotion mode, right? And I can relate to that a little bit. I'm not, and this, don't misunderstand, I'm not comparing myself to Dave Gahan by any stretch of the imagination. But just being a radio talk show host and a personality in a large city, I go out, and less so here in Minneapolis, even though it happens when people recognize me when I'm out doing things, which is fine. I always appreciate it. I love talking to people who listen to the show. When I was in Tucson, it was a regular occurrence. I was there for 9 years, and it's a small city, medium-sized city, but relatively small. You're there long enough, and people recognize you. And I also had a television show while I was there as well. My show was broadcast for 2 hours every single morning. And there's times when you just don't want to talk to people. So maybe that was the case. So it's a bummer you didn't have a good experience, but I hope you enjoyed the film. And again, not providing excuses for Dave. That is a bummer, especially if you traveled all the way there. But I just wonder if Dave was like, I'm not in Depeche Mode promotion mode. Maybe he doesn't really care either way if the movie comes out. I thought it was surprising when, during the press conference afterwards, David made the comment that he heard in the end and was like, I was unfamiliar with the song. Oh, yeah, I recorded it. That just seems bonkers to me for the amount of effort they put into each track, that, you know, there would even be a moment of hesitation, of unfamiliarity with a particular track that they made. But not being a musician and not having recorded as many songs as Depeche Mode has, I suppose that is a thing. And clearly it was for Dave. Unless he was exaggerating a little bit. Maybe he was. All right. Thank you so much to everybody who wrote in this week. I greatly appreciate it. As always, if you haven't taken the time already to check out my science fiction series, EMBARK, I hope you'll do so. If you enjoy science fiction, treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. Set in the future with air and spaceflight culture replacing car culture, 2172, after Earth faces its end, follow pilots Taft, Katha, and their crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. It's a 7-book series available in hardcover, paperback, ebook, Kindle Unlimited, and audiobook. I wrote it for adults, but it's completely age-appropriate for those 11 and older. If you enjoy science fiction, you love Depeche Mode, obviously, or you wouldn't be listening to this show. Depeche Mode plays a large part in the themes of the story. The main character himself is a massive Depeche Mode fan at a time when the music of the 80s through the 2000s is nostalgic and popular among the characters of the story. Again, set in 2172. Head on over to Amazon.com and pick up EMBARK Book 1 in your preferred format if you haven't done this already. Thank you so much for hanging out with the show. Drop me an email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. I'll be back again next week. And until then, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. God bless. And I'll talk to you then. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
Depeche Mode, the podcast. Have a great one.